So answering a question posed by some of the viewers in regard to the time change for today's hearings, I was watching them myself and noticed that instead of the expected 10 a.m. time, it turned out to be just before 10:47 a.m., which turns out to be deeply symbolic because as a result of that, the Leo rising ascendant at 10 a.m. in the middle degrees of the sign shifts to the 25th degree of Leo, which is precisely where Saturn is in Aquarius, the opposite sign. And once you realize what these meetings are about, they're essentially a prosecutorial presentation of the one and only Donald Trump. It's really what they're about. Everything is pointing at him. So first, you put Saturn on the angle like that, and you're increasing the accountability factor, which is what this committee is trying to accomplish. But notice that Saturn in those degrees also highlights the fact that it opposes Trump's rising Mars in Leo. In a sense, it puts Mars on the other angle of the chart. This makes it a lot worse for Trump. And in fact, what I saw in this presentation was pretty devastating in terms of outlining what an effing crook this man is. You know, what a lowlife, corrupt politician, individual, human being he is. And if you want to understand, you know, how this mendacious imbecile works, just sort of read between the lines. What was he doing? He's being told by all his advisors, and most notably by William Barr, his attorney general, who I realize people keep reminding me he's also corrupt. I know he's also corrupt, but in this instance, in this situation, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I'm perfectly happy to accept his testimony. And Barr was telling him, what you're saying makes no sense. It's BS. It makes no sense. I thought the telling moment came when Trump was all worked up, all agitated about the results in Detroit, saying, oh, these votes came in. And Barr was saying to him, no, you actually did better in Detroit than the previous time. And the votes that came in are the votes. That's how the system works. They come in boxes because they're collected in advance and they're brought in that way, and then they're counted. Trump was trying to make it about something else, right? But the key is, when I say reading between the lines, why, in largest measure, did this guy, Trump, the Orange Menace, why did he do it this way? Because he could see the opportunity to make money. In the end, this guy is always about making a buck. There is no money gravy train he'll pass on if he sees the opportunity. And he knew that playing this game of crying foul, it's fraudulent, and getting his supporters worked up meant he could ask them for money. And there was no way he was going to pass that up. And that's why he did it. He knows that he lost, and yet, from the perspective of making money, it was definitely the best play. In any case, he's the one that is being examined, essentially prosecuted without being prosecuted. The evidence is being presented, and the chart perfectly reflects it. All of the strengths that I mentioned in yesterday's video are still there. Same rising sign, everything is the same. I use the whole sign system. So Leo is the first sign and continues to be the first sign. It's just that it's later and brings the Saturn into play. But I think it foretells this thing is ramping up and becoming worse for Trump, which you would expect, by the way. You would expect it based on how troubled his chart is. how there are so many planets basically ganging up on him all at once. Notice that in one very curious development, Fox News didn't carry the first meetings, but they carried these ones. Who knows why? We'll find out why they did. Of course, their commentary is nothing new here, blah, blah, blah. But you see, Trump's way of doing things is like how you run a cult. You want to make sure that the cult members hear as little of the outside message as possible. So you don't want that stuff out there in any way, shape, or form, because if it's being broadcast across the airwaves, even if the commentary from the Fox noise people we have already heard this, it's no big deal. It's pretty compelling because who's telling the story? His people are telling the story. They're not asking Democrats, they're asking people that are working for him. Think of Barr, of all people. Who would have known that, right? William Barr saying these things. So this is a very effective form of counter-programming. And in terms of finding victory, against cockroaches like this, once you know that there are millions and millions of people following him, you're never going to get them all back. You just need a portion. You need enough to tilt the scales. And I do not see how this sequence of meetings being aired like this and getting into the airwaves can be good for Trump. It's not good for Trump, and it's definitely not good for the GOP either going into the election. It's not, because it's going to change some minds, and we're living through a period where the margins are tight. You can't afford to lose anybody. And so I see all this as very positive. But of course, in this case, most notably, because of Trump himself and the strong possibility that he's finally going to be brought to account.